Thank you for joining us for Shree's Sunday New York Times read-along. We will be starting in just under a minute. Please share, please retweet, please comment, please tag your friends. Our guest today is Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat, author of Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present. Thank you for joining us for Shree's Sunday New York Times read-along. My name is Neil Parekh. I am the executive producer and guest host for the show. Our guest today is Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat, professor of history and Italian. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to cheat and go with my notes. Professor of history and Italian studies at New York University. She is the author of Strongmen, Mussolini to the President. Hint, it's about President Donald Trump. Our host, of course, is Shree Srinivasan. We've been hosting the New York Times read-along for 5 years. Please, we are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we're also live on Ruth's Facebook and Twitter accounts. So please like, please share, and we will go to our comments as people are joining us without further ado. And we'll also bring on Shree and myself, and we'll take a look at who's here. We have,
hi Neil,
hey Shree, good morning. We have a few comments that are already coming in. Naomi from the wilds of the Upper West Side, recuperating from surgery. Has never been so entertaining. And we have, who else? Zahid watching as well. Who are the others, Shree, that cycled through? Jonathan Borstein as well, I think I saw.
Yeah, Jonathan's watching from the East Village, and Doug is up early in California. Good morning. I'm looking forward to hearing the professor's thoughts about the current mess we're in. Doug is a former guest on the show and dear friend from Northern California. Sudha Parekh, Neil's mom, is watching from Hastings on Hudson. I'll let you say hello, and then I'll say hello to Auntie too.
Hi, Mom. How are you doing?
Hi, Auntie. Thank you for your incredible support of this show. Jane Barone McDonald is sending us greetings from Paris. Susan Stein's watching from Stuytown in New York. Steve Taylor, one of our producers, is on LinkedIn. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So please tag your friends. They can watch now or watch later. Or please hit retweet. Please hit share. Rachel Cooper is watching from the Upper West Side. And Francesca is watching from Ardsley. Just great to have folks here. Naomi is watching from the Upper West Side, as we said. So lots of folks watching. Tell us where you're watching from, and please ask us questions. This is our 5th year of the New York Times read-along. We are so lucky to have this global audience that gets together every single Sunday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern to listen to a great expert and also talk about the New York Times.
Absolutely. And we couldn't do this without an incredible team, Shree, that puts together the Sunday New York Times read-along every week. So without further ado, I want to make sure that folks know who is helping to put this show together. Paula Kiger, you can follow her at Big Green Pen. Steve Taylor at Steve DeReeve. Julia Weeks at Julia L. Weeks. And Carla Baranauckas. You can follow her at Kabara on Twitter. One of the things that's really great about our show is that we have people who are watching with you on Facebook and on LinkedIn. And our friend Carla is watching on Ruth's Facebook page as well. So if you have questions, if there are links that they can share, links to articles, links to Ruth's website, for example, That's how we'll get that information to you. Too many times, big brands do live stream productions and don't have anyone helping you with providing context. And that's one of the hallmarks of our show. So thank you again to Paula, Steve, Julia, and Carla for their work on the New York Times read-along.
And this is part of what we do at Digimentors with our amazing work shows that we do, as well as our virtual events that we do for organizations big and small. We've done events for 50 people and events for 100,000 people. So if you like what you see here, if you have a virtual event you're planning, please get in touch. And we'd love to talk to you. We love geeking out on virtual events. We're planning events for many months next year. So please get in touch with us. And we'd love to talk to you. Let's also thank our sponsors who make this possible. Our first sponsor we want to thank is Muckrack and Muckrack Academy for all the work that they're doing in helping support this show. Their Fundamentals of Social Media course that I put together. It's a free on-demand certification course that takes about 2 hours of work. You can do it in 2 hours or 2 days or 2 months. Please sign up, mrac.co/social. And I learned a lot putting this together, and I know you will too. And we have one more sponsor to thank.
Absolutely. We also want to thank Strategy Focus Group. In addition to Muckrack, Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. We certainly would like to thank Muckrack and Strategy Focus Group for their support of the New York Times read-along. If you're interested in being a sponsor, please contact Shri at digimentors.group or myself, Neil at digimentors.group. And if you want to learn more about our sponsors, please click on the links, readalong.link/muckrack or readalong.link/strategy focus group. Again, we're so thankful for all of their support and the work that we've been able to do with them, not just on the New York Times read-along, but on other projects as well.
So let's take a look at the paper. You have the paper arrayed in front of you, Neil. So let's talk a little bit about, let's give everyone a quick tour, and then we'll bring Ruth on. For those of us joining from around the world, thank you. You're about to meet Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who is going to talk about her amazing new book. And we're going to take your questions and just chat about what's going on in the world. There's so much happening. There you see the front page. And on the right, you see, I think that's the business section right there. And he'll flip that over so we can see what that is.
You want to see the full picture?
The headline is Partners in Misinformation. And so that's the cover there. And COVID tripped up an airline. Its contractors fell too. That's
the Partners in Misinformation is the American far right and critics of China are pushing unsubstantiated pandemic claims, but that's the graphic they used.
Oh yeah, that. The right's going to hate that. hate that. And there we go. Sunday review.
Sunday review
of your contacts. This is something that you must see online if you haven't already. This is Farhad Manjoo's piece about contact tracing, and they have displayed it really well online. And if we get a chance later, we might show you what it looks like online. But this is basically the contacts of your contacts, meaning that you think you have a small bubble, but his bubble turned out to be like 128 people. And this was a really well executed piece. And Sunday Styles cover.
About facing health risks, Americans adapt to a Thanksgiving that requires hard choices. One thing that occurred to me, Shri, if you look at the Sunday Style, Sunday Review, and even the At Home section in terms of the covers, and even if you look at Sunday Business more broadly, all graphics, all artwork, as opposed to
nothing fits above
photographs.
the fold, right? Nothing,
right?
No headlines above the fold.
Nothing fits above the fold. Even with the arts and leisure section. I mean, the headline, the show has been canceled, But what are they talking about? You do have to go down, and actually they have it in a smaller font, which is interesting. I mean, it's even hard for me to read the black against the blue. Many incumbent presidents have gone on the campaign trail to make their cases for a second term. Donald Trump was the first to campaign for a second season. So that's really interesting. So I guess they're looking at the presidency as The Apprentice, I guess. The one photograph, except for the front page that I see, and here's the larger view of the sections, is on the book review article about the Americans, writers who show us who we are. And this is Joy Williams by A.O. Scott. We'll definitely get to the magazine later in the show, but another great cover, and we'll show the behind the scenes video on how they put the cover together, but it looks like a dossier about President Trump. It's a case. Individual 1, Donald Trump's potential criminal liability is the key to understanding his presidency. And when he leaves office, will present the country with a historic dilemma. And they have the byline here in the bottom corner by Jonathan Mahler with a date stamp on the top. So it'll be interesting to see how they put that magazine together.
Well, thanks for that tour, and we're ready
to
look at the front page. And so let's say hello to our guest as well and have her join us as we look at the front page together.
Absolutely. And there's Ruth Ben-Ghiat. As a reminder for folks who may be joining us late, Ruth Ben-Ghiat is a professor of history and Italian studies at New York University and the author of Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present. And my spoiler alert, it's about President Donald Trump. So with that, we will bring on Ruth Ben-Ghiat.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi.
Thanks for being here Sunday morning. My first question to all our guests, how are you? Where are you? And how's your family been kind of handling the pandemic?
Well, and that's the most important thing. In between New York and outside New York, and like so many people around the world, just digesting this enormous change in the way we do business and the way we can or cannot see. My parents are in two different foreign countries, and I can't go and see them. So this is our sense of loss and our sense of connection. We've never felt those so acutely.
Well, we are all thinking about our families and friends, especially at this holiday time. How are you spending Thanksgiving?
Just a quiet day. My parents are immigrants, and we didn't do much in the way of Thanksgiving growing up, unless we were invited to other people's homes. But I would travel to see my family other times, and that's just not possible. So Thanksgiving will be, I think, a day of quiet reflection and connecting with people on social media platforms, on the phone. That's what we can do, FaceTime.
Yeah, and I think we'll be the same. We're in Puerto Rico for a few weeks, and part of the reason Neil is showing the newspapers and doing double duty, executive producing and running the New York Times cameras, because it's hard to get the Sunday New York Times early enough to be on the air here. We want to talk about your book and talk about all the amazing work you do and all of that, but we just want to also just glance at the front page. Let's get a sense of what's happening today on the front page, and then I'll also ask you about your kind of relationship with print newspapers and how much you still read in print your news.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, so go ahead, tell us.
I haven't read newspapers in print for a long time. I do miss it. I as a historian, I love going in archives, and there's no substitute for. That's why I was very interested in the New York Times Magazine, the file folder, because the sense of anticipation that is common to when you get the paper or when you order a file in the archive and you don't know exactly what's going to be in it, that sense of anticipation and surprise. I do miss that. You can't replicate that on scrolling on your phone.
Yeah, it's true. And here Naomi says, what a terrific magazine cover. And Carla says, good morning from New Jersey. Looking forward to hearing Ruth. And lots of other folks are tuning in as well. So here's the front page of the paper, and you see the very striking photograph that Neil will have to tell us what that is.
Absolutely. This is actually the caption is the R504 Kolyma Highway, known as the Road of Bones, a route built by prisoners to deliver still more prisoners to Stalin's labor camps in the Russian Far East. And there it is. Here's the story on the left-hand side, Road of Bones to the Gulag, haunted still. But it's a very interesting display image. The lead story, of course, is President moves to hem Biden in on U.S. policies. No deference is shown. Outgoing administration rushing to preserve Trump's agenda. The lead story today, Professor Ben-Ghiat, ties right into the work that you're doing and your book, authoritarian tendencies. No?
Yeah, actually, both the picture and the lead story, because one of the reasons I wrote Strongmen is I felt we're living in a time of real attempts to revise authoritarian history. So in Putin's Russia, there are historians who are sitting in penal colonies now because they dared to write the wrong thing about the gulags. So this is very appropriate. And you can't mention the Nazi-Soviet pact in Russia now; it's illegal. So I felt it was time to step back and look at 100 years of this kind of history and all the destruction it's caused and the way that it's being rewritten. And of course, how it came to America in its own particular form that Trump gives it today. So this thinking about the gulags can be dangerous in Russia, but we can appreciate our democracy. We can put this photo on the front page.
And the article just below that, Politics, Science, and the Remarkable Race for a Viable Vaccine. If I'm not mistaken, it was Geraldo Rivera who was suggesting that the vaccine should be named after Trump. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've been doing videos every day called a video blog project I have called The Transition, because the minute that the election was called for Biden, but the GOP and Trump wouldn't accept the results, I realized we were in for a very strange period, right? And nothing has been, quote, normal, meaning democratic, about Donald Trump. And so, of course, inevitably, as I foreshadow in the book, which I turned in the summer, but I already said he wasn't going to go quietly. And Rivera this is about Trump's personality cult, that the vaccine should be named after Trump. And he imagined people saying, have you taken your Trump today? So I linked this in my little video. It's called Beware of False Saviors, that throughout history, these leaders have been considered, they present themselves as healers and saviors of the nation. I am your voice, Trump told us. And it's very interesting to me how many of them are still sticking to this idea that Trump, who has criminally mismanaged the pandemic and is out to plunder the nation, which is what the lead story is about in the Times, also next to the picture, it is still being touted as a healer, so that he should be honored. It's really it's a quite predictable state of affairs, but we can obviously find it shocking.
Here is the website where you're doing your work. This is terrific, ruthbenghiat.com/transition. And you can see the daily post that Ruth has been doing. Thank you for putting this together, because I know it's helpful to so many people to understand what's going on. If we can take a step back, can you tell us, for those still worried that somehow, given the incredible luck that Donald Trump has, is there any chance that the legal cases may end up in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court may turn over the mandate of the people?
You can't rule anything out. And in the conclusion to my book, which was filed to the publisher in July, I said, never underestimate the tenacity and the willingness to do anything possible to stay in power. Now, the actual record he's had an abysmal record. I've forgotten what the latest total is. It was yesterday. It was 32 cases he'd lost and 1 he'd won. Maybe it's up to 2 for him. But that strategy is not working. The other thing people are worrying about, so we hear the word coup bandied around right now. A third of my book is about military coups, like people who came to power through military coups. Today they come through elections and they manipulate elections to get there. But technically what Trump is doing could be considered what's called an auto coup or a self coup, when somebody already in power is trying to stay there. But the military option is not really alive. And this is why, if you remember, shortly, not so long ago, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, chose the moment, very pointed, to make a declaration that the armed forces will serve the Constitution and not an individual. The fact he felt he had to make that declaration tells you a lot about what Trump was trying to do. So the military option's probably out. There's militia, there's other people who are allied with him. He's not doing very well in terms of state-by-state elections. Who knows what he'll do? This is why he's done the Supreme Court maneuver, of course, as we all know. It's hard to predict, and unpredictability and chaos is a mark of Trump's rule, of course.
And there's been that unpredictability and chaos at every single step, so there's no reason it won't continue as we're seeing right now. There are some deadlines coming up, some state certifications, yes, which will make it much harder. Just for people who are still having nightmares of the year 2000, the difference was that there was a 500 vote difference in one state versus hundreds of thousands cumulatively in multiple states. And so it's much harder for the Supreme Court to intervene in one case and make a difference. And even in 2000, it wasn't that they declared him the president, they stopped the counting, the recounting that was happening, and that caused him to be declared, George Bush to be declared the president. So the victor in that case. So that's where the differences lie. I also say, Ruth, that I lived through a coup in Fiji, yes, where this was when I was in high school, and it was Fiji, where it was all very peaceful, no guns were used, yes, or anything, but it was still, to see the will of the people being overturned was really problematic and traumatic for so many people. What is it that links the tendencies of Donald Trump to the other people you cite in your book?
So we can start with the chaos. So the outcome differs. We're not in a period the book goes over 3 periods of history, fascist takeovers, military coups. And so you have the 20th century one-party states, one-party dictatorships that are not as common anymore. And then we get to new authoritarians, people like Trump who, they get into power through elections. They try and manipulate elections to stay there. So the outcomes are very different. But unfortunately for us, and now he's leaving, so we can be slightly less scared. His personality, his leadership style maps on 100% to all of the rulers that I studied. So the chaos is a feature and not a bug. And these are men who are very insecure, they're very vindictive, they're paranoid. And so they construct a kind of inner sanctum around themselves with flatterers and family members. I have a paragraph about the role of sons-in-law, from Mussolini up to Jared Kushner. And because they're always loyalty and not professionalism or expertise is the primary qualification for serving them. And this is true of Mobutu in the Congo, of Gaddafi, of Pinochet in Chile. So all of this is very familiar. And so they're hiring and firing constantly. They're trying desperately to find more and more loyal people, more people they can humiliate, because humiliating others is a part of how they feel important. So all of these tendencies, which have been played out in the New York Times and in other papers for 4 years, are actually features of this authoritarian style of rule. So that's just one example.
Thank you for giving us that insight. And here's what Diane says, checking in from South Jersey. What an insightful and important guest. And folks, if you're new to this show, we're live every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, where we have a guest and we read the Sunday New York Times, the print New York Times, and talk about the news. And we'd love for you to share this with your friends and family, and please tag them, and so they can watch this later if they can't watch it right now. So many other comments coming in as well. We had a comment here and a question from Dom, who says, right on, Ruth, when did you begin foreseeing the Trump's refusal to accept the results of the election? And when did you begin writing the book? So slightly different questions. So why don't you take us back to when you decided to write this?
So I decided to do the book. I put aside an academic book I was starting on prisoners of war in World War II. And because when I had been studying fascism and kind of empire also, so different types of domination. And I think when I saw Donald Trump in the fall of 2015 start doing his rallies and his loyalty oaths, and he was retweeting neo-Nazi propaganda, I realized something was up. And I was already writing for CNN on historical issues. And so I had this platform. So I started to chronicle what was going on as a way of warning people. And so before Trump was inaugurated, I had already worked out, I published an op-ed of like maybe a few days before his inauguration, said Trump is following the authoritarian playbook. And I was warning people that we won't be able to consider him in a democratic frame of reference, because that's not what he's after. And so I continued to write, and the book came out of these writings in CNN and The Atlantic and The Guardian, other places I was writing. So it's very much a book for the public. And it's the first book to put Trump in historical perspective. And it's the core of it are these tools of rule: virility, like so machismo, corruption, propaganda, and violence. And each one goes over a century, so the reader can see how, starting with Mussolini, these same, like the media is different. For example, today we have digital media, but the rules of the personality cult and some of the rules of corruption are the same going up to Trump. So it's a way that we can, and I'm living in America, so it was a way to understand what is happening to us. And I became, of course, more and more alarmed as I wrote the book because the patterns were clear. And from that, the other part of your question, it was pretty clear to me that he was not going to leave office quietly. And when I had to turn in the book, I didn't know the results of the election. And that's why I put in that warning. It's one of the last things I say about Trump in the book is don't underestimate him, because he has too much to lose by leaving office.
Thank you. Linda says, didn't Mussolini have his son-in-law killed?
He did. And here we have the kind of, these men, it's a very, I end on a hopeful note, but there's a lot of grim things, because these men are, I don't use this word in the book, hoarders, but they are maniacs about possessing souls and minds through their propaganda. They want our attention 24/7. They want money. They want territory. They just have, too much is never enough. But then they discard people. So Mussolini, used his son-in-law, appointed him foreign minister, and then his son-in-law turned, because Mussolini was voted out by his own people after almost 20 years of rule. His Grand Council voted him out, and his son-in-law, because Italy was losing the war, because all of them lead their countries to destruction. And so his son-in-law, along with others, voted to remove him, and he had him executed. So when Hitler rescued Mussolini, and so he was back in power in the north, he had his son-in-law executed because his son-in-law was no longer useful to him. So these processes, and this very different context, but when Trump was, he was built up by Fox News, and in the book, I call Fox News an executive producer of the Trump presidency. And then he turned on Fox News because they're no longer useful to him. So everybody is used and discarded by these men.
Thank you for that, folks. We're talking to Ruth Ben-Ghiat and having a great set of insights being shared with us. So thank you very much. I want to show you one of the comments here from Jay. Says, thank you for bringing Ruth to the show. New York Times Read Along team. Love the insights, adding strong men to my to be read series list. So everybody please check out Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present. And tell us about the book title. Did you decided not to put Trump in the title? I'm sure this was one of the many discussion points.
It certainly was, because I mean, partly an editorial decision that there are many, many Trump books, and we didn't want to reduce this to a Trump book, because the unique thing about the book is that it's the first book to place Trump at the end of a whole in the present, where this style of rule that's been developing for a whole century is going. But Trump ends every chapter, basically. So, and Mussolini, he's there because he was the foundation, along with the early communists. He laid down the template for authoritarian rule. So, and many people find similarities between Mussolini and Trump in their posturing, and they're jutting their jaws out, and the slogans. There are a lot of similarities.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. I do want to talk a minute about the similarities and differences. I have been saying, I started saying in 2016, in the summer of 2016, that it's the summer of 32 in Berlin, and that I didn't think Trump would win, but people, if he did, people would ask, what were you doing? What was it like in 2016? As terrible as the things that he has done, in some cases much worse than we had expected, and in some cases just ineptitude has been, and incompetence has been part of the problem. What do you think about those comparisons? And we saw recently that Christiane Amanpour had to, walk back one of the comparisons she made with parts of the Nazi experience. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the good things in doing a book like this is you see what stays the same and what has changed. So I'm a historian, and I'm very careful about language. So although I've spent many years studying fascism, I don't call Trump a fascist. I prefer to leave the word fascist to that period of a one-party state, a dictatorship, total extinction of opposition. That's not what we have today. It's not how authoritarianism works today. And it can be misleading, because you can imagine people thought I was alarmist, and they'd say, what are you talking about? Because I did write an article for The Atlantic in August 2016 predicting that Trump would behave in some ways like Mussolini without calling him a fascist. And we always think about Hitler for very good reasons, but Mussolini was he's not an analogy, but he's a better influence, because he was a prime minister in a democracy for 3 years. And during those 3 years, he kind of chipped away he was the first person doing this. And then he declared dictatorship in 1925 because there was a special investigation against him for corruption and for killing the head of the Socialist Party, and he was going to go to jail. So the first dictatorship in history was called because a strongman wanted to escape prosecution for his crimes. So all of that is very relevant. And today it's evolution, not revolution. So Putin and Orban have been there a long time. When people say, well, why are you talking about Trump as an authoritarian? Because that's the word I use. He's not doing this, he's not doing that, like Putin. But Putin and Orban and Erdogan started somewhere. And
Sure.
Trump's done a huge amount of damage that I think that we have not yet been able to assess.
Francesca writes, I'm curious to why the mainstream media didn't cover his authoritarian leadership more and the potential downstream risks. There were certainly people who covered a lot of it, but she's asking more generally.
So and this too recurs, and it's partly understandable. One of the themes is that people don't want this denial. People don't want to see what's in front of them. They don't want to give up their cherished notions of national character. So you have this with the Germans. How could Hitler, this is the most sublime culture, look at all they've accomplished. How could, a raving lunatic have any success? So some people, you always want to dismiss these men as clowns, as crazy, right? As madmen, because it's too upsetting and you don't quite often know what to do. So it's easier to keep saying, well, it's not that bad, it's not that bad. So that's one reason. The other is to do with models of media coverage. And as long as the press was seeing Trump in a democratic frame of reference, then they were going to do the both sides thing because they weren't prepared. And we've never had a dictatorship. We've never had foreign occupation. Some people are watching from around the world, so they know what I'm talking about. We didn't have this, so we don't know anything else in our own home. We did plenty of damage abroad, right? We propped up plenty of dictatorships abroad. But in our own home, we didn't have this. So we didn't know how to recognize it and how to cover it in the case of the media.
Thank you. Linda's got a question that ties into this. Does the professor think the press largely normalized Trump in the beginning?
They absolutely did, and it stems from this working with the wrong paradigm. If you see him, so another classic thing, and I have quotes in the book, it's very tragic, is that I call it the pivot delusion. That if we bring this guy in the system and we humor him, if we cover him as a normal person, he'll respond to that and he'll calm down, right? So it's partly that, partly the press didn't know what to do. The first time that there was a press conference and Trump humiliated journalists and insulted them and made them sit down and told them to shut up, I had the thought, but this is, me, that they should have all stood up, turned their backs on him and walked out, because I have a phrase in the book that these strong men like Trump, because of their ego needs, they need the audience more than the audience needs them. If you cut off their oxygen early, you push back, they would change. But that presumes a historical hindsight that they didn't have.
Thank you. And now you've warned us all, and we've seen it for sure. Patricia says, thank you, Ruth. Absolutely loving the history lesson. So interesting to know these insightful details. And our friend Pradnya Haldipur is tagging her friends on LinkedIn. We love it when people do this so that they can, so everyone please do this. Tag your friends on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, and they can watch this and learn from Ruth. We're also going to get back to the paper in just a minute. Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like to teach during the pandemic? What are the different ways you've experienced it, and doing the remote teaching and all of that?
So this fall was my first experience because I was on leave. I had a sabbatical in the spring, and I did find it challenging to have a sense of community. And my classes are mostly seminars, so they're small, and I have having a community and connecting with the students is very important, and creating a space that's safe where people can say anything and have. I've had Trump supporters in my classes, and I teach fascism, I teach war, I teach war and film, I teach propaganda. So these are very topical things. And I found that, like, for example, I have a song that I have playing when everybody comes into the classroom. That doesn't work so well, virtually. So I think I Zoomed with every single student individually because it's very important to establish that connection. And you also have to you have to have more patience with students. Some of them are in NYU is a global university. There are people who are halfway around the world living with their parents because they couldn't get back to the States. Everyone's trying their best. And I think that many people have made big adjustments to their teaching styles, sometimes for the better. It's forced us, like in every other realm of life, to rethink what we were doing. But for me, the connections, doing what you can to not lose that connection with the students is the most important.
Thank you, Ruth, and spoken like a fabulous professor. Lots of other comments coming in. We're going to switch to the paper in just a second, but just want to show you. Debbie says that the press liked the high rating, self-interest, not public interest. And yesterday, a journalist tweeted something like, you really want Trump to run again in 2024, don't you? It was kind of a glib comment, a joke. But a lot of people reacted to that, saying the press wants him to run because they love the drama and it's good for ratings, all of that. So where do you come down on that?
So I wouldn't extrapolate too much from that one person, because I talk to journalists every day, and many of them have been threatened. A huge amount of people have been threatened, and they don't talk about it publicly. They're exhausted. All of the White House correspondents, normally after the election, where they're working, 18 hours a day, they have some kind of break, and this is welcome to pandemic world, and you don't have any break anymore, right? So I think but what it does speak to, which we need to take seriously, is Trump's success in building a personality cult. And in the book, I talk about this situations that occur, and it's all the more notable now because Trump doesn't have, like Berlusconi was in a democracy, but he's in the book because he owned TV networks. Trump doesn't own TV networks. He had Fox. We don't have a one-party state, so there's no synchronized messaging. But he's been able to impose himself 24/7 and kind of monopolize our attention. And this is the hunger of these guys, to monopolize our attention, to have us to always be in our heads. They thrive on that. And this is why they can't leave office. They're very ill-equipped to leave office because they become addicted to this attention and the riches and all the other things that they get. So the media, this one person was kind of also commenting on the clicks, the kind of sense of adrenaline, that what's Trump going to do now? What outrage is he going to have now? And this was true with Berlusconi in Italy. So there are precedents for this, but it's destructive. And I think a lot of journalists would be very happy to be covering other things and other people.
Yeah, I think that's for sure. Let's ask Neil to show us the New York Times, because I think we only got through the top of the front page and we have the whole paper to get through. So let's go in there, and folks, please continue to post your comments and questions. Neil will be able to tell us what's happening on the front page and walk us through, especially the stories below the fold. And he'll unmute himself.
Absolutely. So below the fold, focus, of course, is on the pandemic, opposite realities in two states. This is a focus. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was North Dakota and Vermont when I was looking at earlier, or maybe South Dakota rather. But states with the fewest restrictions have the worst outbreaks. That's the graph on the left. The most restrictive states, New Mexico, New York, Rhode Island, on the right. One of the graphs that I saw on online, I think it showed like 60,000 cases in South Dakota and 6,000 in Vermont, if I'm not mistaken. But the interesting thing about graphs, and you see it here, they don't actually have the y-axis, the number. These graphs would be much different if you had the numbers and you could show the scale. On the bottom right, duty or party, more about Trump. Vote certification is a moment of truth for the GOP. And that was, I think, over the last few days, my comment. And when I had a chance to talk with Professor Ben-Ghiat earlier, it was almost like peak quote unquote coup was taking place Thursday, Friday, when Trump was calling in the folks from Michigan, the elected officials from Michigan, to see what they could do about the results. And Lindsey Graham was calling the Georgia Secretary of State, seeing if they could lose some ballots conveniently. Inside, my favorite section, the Inside the Times, the story behind the story. And you have the headline writers at the Times had a delicate task the week of the election. So it goes through the first headline: Biden beats Trump, race finally called after record turnout, chaotic term ends with rare incumbent loss. And then it goes through the other headlines that they work through. Turnout soars along with suspense as nation in tumult delivers verdict, all the way down. So it just shows the challenges. And one of the things to remind people about, as most viewers would know, reporters often get blamed for the headlines on their stories, and they're not responsible for those headlines. And in fact, sometimes I've seen reporters be frustrated by the headlines that they're given to their stories.
I'm sure that has happened perhaps to Ruth also, when opinion writers have the same thing happen when they have to answer for some headline that an opinion editor puts on their columns.
Totally.
One thing that's interesting, Shri, one of your favorite pieces on this day, the usual piece where the New York Times looks back, is not in its usual bottom left corner on page 2.
So either they ran out of space because of this big Inside the Times, or they may be killing it. We don't know.
Yeah, interesting just to note. The of interest section, again, this is a print-only feature. Noteworthy facts from today's paper, almost a guide to what's in the paper. The embrace of anything cozy is known as, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that, Hygge in Danish, Hygge in Danish, and Koslig in Norwegian. That was my best. And the title of the article, Get Hygge with It in the Icy Months, in the home section. American corporations are taking advantage of low interest rates by selling bonds at a frenetic pace, more than $1.6 billion this year, according to the data provider Deal Logic. That's in the business section. A recent Twitter photograph of the actor Anthony Hopkins in his backyard, captioned "Stay present, one day at a time," earned more than 134,000 likes. Shri, 134,000 likes. That's not bad. He could teach us a thing or two about social media. Okay. A May study from the Knot and Wedding Wire found that 12% of couples moved their rescheduled weddings to a different day of the week. Interesting why weekday weddings work. That's the article in Sunday Styles. At Princeton and Yale universities, more students come from families in the top 1% of income than from the bottom 60%, in the book review. Houston, Dallas, and Atlanta are hot housing markets, according to data provided by Zillow. Traffic to listings in these cities has jumped 88%. And there's the Anthony Hopkins post. So this was the tweet. Is that 134,000 likes, Shri?
Yeah, that's
wow.
Yeah, there you go.
Even higher.
Yeah.
And so then more in this page 2. And again, this Tiffany ad in the top right corner. Shri, what did Stuart Elliott tell us about that?
It's been there since 2017.
2017?
Yeah, so it's been
3
there
years?
Since, 1917. Yeah, not just 2 years, but 103 years, which is amazing.
And they pay for the privilege to have that top right corner. It's not a huge ad, but they want that particular spot, which is really interesting. So let's see what else.
More comments as they're coming in. Janine,
Yeah, sure.
Journalists I know also detest the erosion of truth and why that matters with this presidency. And you're looking at University of Michigan pivots after a COVID semester. So tell us what's on the page.
So tracking an outbreak, this is their pandemic section. The first picture, Karen O'Brien and her son William, a freshman, packed up on Monday. The winter semester is set to start January 19th. Off-campus housing in Ann Arbor, students have been scrambling to secure accommodations for winter semester. And then here, Harrison Bromberg left, plans to return to his off-campus apartment. Emma Spall Wright has also found a place off campus. Professor Ben-Ghiat, you have I think it was a daughter at a very prestigious liberal arts school in New England. What school does she go to?
She's at Wesleyan.
Wesleyan University, that's right. How are they, for folks who don't know, I went to Wesleyan as well. But you were telling me how they were dealing with the coronavirus and the testing.
They closed up shop as of 2 days ago, but they made it through the whole semester by relentless testing and being very, very careful. And they had hardly any cases. And I think there's a community ethos at that particular school, which helped. I want to make a comment about the tragedy of the coronavirus exploding and how people have been outraged that Trump is golfing and that he hasn't done anything about it. And that is, again, we go back to, if we see him in, if you see him in a democratic framework, these things are indeed an outrage. But he was never there to govern in any democratic sense with a small d. Public welfare couldn't care less. He was there to make money for Trump Organization, to build his personality cult, and to stay in power by spreading hatred and keeping us polarized. So all of the golfing, people say, oh, he's lazy, doesn't care. That's his job, because he spent 1 out of 3 every 3 days. Now he's back doing it. But for the first 3 years until coronavirus shut this grifting down, he spent 1 out of every 3 days at a Trump branded property, because the job, as he sees it, is promoting Trump properties. So public welfare and caring about other people is the farthest thing from this administration's mind. And this is part of the tragedy of having an authoritarian type ruler. Even in a democracy, you see how much damage he can cause.
Absolutely. I do want to just do a quick audio check. Is my audio better than before? I was told that it was a little too strong, a little overmodulated. Is this a little bit better, Shri?
It is a little better, yeah. It was loud. When you're coming in as voice of God, you were, overpowering us, Mr. God. That's what was
some gods are more powerful than others, Shri.
Exactly.
The rest of the paper. So this cases are rampant where limits relax. This was the front page story that we referenced earlier, and some really interesting graphics work in terms of the colors. This is an index score. States with fewest control measures, states with stronger control measures. So you see South Dakota and Iowa and North Dakota are on top of the list, and not a good list to be on top of. States with intermediate control measures, Wyoming, Nevada, Oregon, Michigan are the top few, and then the tightest control measures, and starting from the bottom, New Mexico, New York, Rhode Island, and Maine. And you can see the corresponding. So this is where I appreciate the graphics work, where they're on the same scale and you can compare one against the other. South Dakota and Iowa at the top, all the way down, you see the changing curves. You can see that New Mexico really did flatten. New York had that big spike that we all know about back in the spring, and then it's been fairly controlled since then. It's not as high as other states. This is an interesting. So go ahead.
Janine says, I love to hear the professor put Trump's governing so succinctly. Why don't people see this? So Ruth, you're making an impact here. You're going to show us this dramatic ad on the right.
Yeah. and see whether that a little bit of lighting helps. A full page ad, only see this woman's eyes, an African-American woman. Let's keep it up. Let's all mask up. As some of the most trusted hospitals in the nation, we know it's tough that we all need to do our part and keep wearing masks, but here's what we all also know. The science has not changed. Masks slow the spread of COVID-19. So please join us as we all embrace the simple ask: wear, care, share with Mask Up. Together, wearing is caring, and together we are saving lives. QR code in the bottom goes to everymaskup.com. And just to see who signed on to this ad, must be dozens of different health organizations. You're finding that on the web as well. Advent Health, Adventist Health, all the way down, Baptist Health, Northeast Florida, Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center, Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York, Ohio Health, a whole list around the country. And there's a list on the screen as well.
Stanford Medicine. I wonder who didn't join and how they might be, they missed an email or something to sign up. Here's Northwell Health. And so this website's called everymaskup.com. And this is that picture that we were looking at. And there you can see side by side. And this is something that's so important that everyone needs to mask up if they can. Here in Puerto Rico, Ruth, it seemed like 99% mask wearing wherever we've gone because they force you. It's kind of a mask mandate of sorts. And then when you walk into a store, they take your temperature and they force you to use hand sanitizer. They kind of don't even ask and they kind of put it on you. So I don't know how some people would react to that, the forced hand sanitizing, but it makes us feel better at least that that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see. Chitachi's watching. Chitachi's former guest on the show and says hello. And so many other comments coming in. Janine was saying that Brown tests twice a week, completes a daily symptom tracker, and it's also a very successful program. So lots to think about in terms of how schools are handling this. Can you explain, as a student of history and a scholar of history, how the most apolitical of acts, wearing a mask, became so political? And is this something Trump, you think, thought up on his own as a way of, rallying his base? Or was there a moment where this could have gone in another direction, where this wouldn't have become political and we may have saved hundreds of thousands of lives?
I think this connects to other things in American history or American society. Some are global, the anti-vaccine movement, this very particular sense of American, quote, freedom, that the government should not be intervening. And of course, this attitude is also why we have such crappy health care and have a low standard of living compared to some other countries. I also want to make a point, though, that this disregard for collective responsibility, this disregard for human loss, for tragedies that are befalling us, has also something to do with the true American exceptionalism, the fetish about guns. And I link this kind of nonchalance about mass death to, I think it builds on this, I must have, and we're not talking about having a handgun to, if you live in a rural area. This is the only country in the world with 500 million guns in private hands. I'm talking about people who have arsenals that normally you only see in situations of ethnic strife or tribal conflicts or civil wars. And no other country is like that. And so this idea of freedom is having the freedom to have lethal weapons and having toddlers are now official category, armed toddlers. So to sustain this, you have to have a truly perverted sense of community and solidarity. And so there's a disrespect for human life. And I think that is factoring in, as well as the anti-science and conspiracy theories. So Trump has weaponized all of these things. This is what I'm but it builds on something that's way larger than he is.
Sure. Folks, we have about 30 minutes left with Ruth Ben-Ghiat, amazing professor of history and Italian studies at NYU. Her book is called Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present. And that present, of course, includes Donald Trump. Here are some of the reviews. I'm a big fan of Sarah Kendzior, and so she says, everyone who cares about American democracy should read this book. And Daniel Ziblatt says, Strongmen is a gripping and illuminating picture of how strongmen have deployed violence, seduction, and corruption. And Timothy Snyder says, with a steady gaze and an eye for the telling detail, Ruth Ben-Ghiat delivers a timely analysis of a certain kind of charisma, of how a certain kind of charisma delivers political disaster. And that's what we have seen in America. But Ruth, I do want to ask, a lot of us will consider the last 4 years a disaster, and elections are a referendum on a sitting president's work and his legacy. How did 70 million plus people see all that and say, yeah, I want more of it?
This is the success of his personality cult, in part. There are people, so there's two things. One is that, and again, when we say he's incompetent, it depends what his goals were. For his main goal, besides, making money for Trump organization, making people loyal to him and building this personality cult, he's succeeded magnificently. And in fact, the canons of the personality cult, this is one interesting thing in looking back 100 years, they haven't changed. You have to be a man of the people, so very relatable. And so Trump has his tweets at all hours of the day and night with misspellings, and he uses very low level of language. But you're also a man above all other men. You're special. So he's this glamorous, he's a glamorous brute, really. And he also has been accorded, like everybody from Mussolini onwards, that evangelicals and Orthodox Jews believe he's there by the will of God to save the nation. So he's a man above all other men and an ordinary man. So once these personality cults kind of develop, people stick with the ruler no matter what he does or says. And in Italy and Germany, and again, you had a closed society and different circumstance, it took people being bombed in World War II for them to start waking up that perhaps these rulers were not what they said they were. So that's part of it. There's also the success of the conspiracy theories and propaganda that led people to believe that there was no alternative to Trump, that Biden was a socialist who is going to ruin the country and open the borders. So there are people in that group, the 70 million, who were kind of situational. They're maybe they don't even like Trump that much, but they're too afraid. They've been taught by propaganda. They're too afraid of what will happen to America if Biden came in.
Thank you for laying that out. That really helps us understand this situation. Lots of comments still coming in. And Chitachi asks, do you think that the failure of teaching critical thinking skills factors into this at all?
I do. I agree. Yes. Both, we're going to have civic education against misinformation, which many countries have now. I think we also have not taught, and I'm speaking here I wrote a book on film propaganda. I teach, a lot of stuff about images. We need to teach people to look critically at images, and this is going to be more and recognize, misinformation in image form. And this is more important than ever because of deep fakes and AI. So we're going to have to invest at a grassroots level in civic education that will have to include a greater discernment about against conspiracy theories and propaganda.
And that'll require a lot of careful attention. And speaking of deep fakes, this is something I'm sure you saw online, Ruth, earlier this week. The Times showed us kind of an endless loop of people who don't exist. So this person, for example, does not exist. produced by artificial intelligence. Your thoughts on deep fakes, as you said, and their impact on our lives going forward?
I think it's going to be very challenging. One reason is in societies where you have authoritarian-minded rulers, one of the main things they do is blackmail people and use evidence, written or now visual, video evidence. Putin's been doing this for 20 years, and this comes from communist days. But all these rulers I study got the cooperation of people and intimidated them through blackmail. So you can see how deep fakes, manufacturing images of people doing things, can be weaponized very easily. One interesting effect of this particular piece, the gender fluidity part, is a point I want to make, because today right-wing leaders like Putin and Orban and transgender people have been kicked out of the military in Trump's America, have a lot invested in keeping people in their gender assigned at birth. And Orban recently passed a law in Hungary saying you can't, first he banned gender studies, you can't teach it anymore. And now he says that you cannot legally or bureaucratically be anything except what you were born as. But gender fluidity through this exercise here actually shows us the opposite of how the message of, that things can be changed, right? So it can work. This is an example of social media definitely works for authoritarians, but it also, I have a chapter on resistance in the book, and I talk about how dissidents and protesters use social media all over the world to undercut, the people they're protesting in Russia and in Hong Kong, right? So I flagged the gender fluidity as something that's very actually threatening to today's rulers.
So let's just see that again, as Neil, you were just kind of sliding back and forth on there. I can't hear you, Neil. So just as you were going back and forth there, if you can just slide that again. Yeah, if you can just slide that again so people can see. So
sure. So with this is, so I want to go back to the top. One of the things that's interesting just about it was hard to show this article as a screen share. It wasn't coming up correctly. This is how involved. I'm going to try and refresh the screen to see if we can get the picture on the top. It wasn't showing at first, but this shows the images, and these are all fakes. These are all computer generated, and I'm just scrolling down. It's a really great piece online, and our team will share it in the comments. And when you get down to moving a little faster, here are the different sliders. So this one is on age. The same image all the way to here.
Wow.
All right. The eyes weren't as pronounced when I looked at it earlier. Just a slight change. Perspective was interesting.
Yeah, so this could affect like the modeling business, right? So instead of trying to go out and hire a model who looks a certain way, they could just adjust these fake models in theory.
But look at the mood, right?
Scary.
All fake.
But in terms of,
and then I was showing the gender and then race ethnicity as well.
So in terms of these two, the gender and the race and ethnicity, again, what authoritarian states do, it's all about segregation. And here's where America's past is. I mean, there are historians who talk about the South under Jim Crow being a version of authoritarian rule, and I agree with that. But it's all about keeping people apart. You are white and you are black. It should have nothing to say to each other. you are male and you are female, and we don't want any, any messing with that. Whereas these exercises in having things on a continuum are actually radically subversive of that mentality. So again, there's plenty of ways that these things are being weaponized. There's lots of studies about this, but they're also sending a message about humanity that is counter to that.
And something that I think
this is a great example of. Go ahead, Shri. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the bridge that we try and connect in terms of the print edition of the New York Times. This is a great example of what you can do online with the newspaper, with graphics, with the sliders and the transition from one image to another.
And Chitachi says, thank you so much for this. This is really timely. I'm currently part of a team designing a course on visual culture. Janine says, fascinating. And Himali says, wow. Someone else said, goodness me. And Carla has shared this on Facebook, Steve on LinkedIn. And this is, again, what we do on our shows on Digimentors is we have people in each of the channels so that you can make these annotations, make the shows more interesting and more useful to folks as they're reading this. So here is Linda's comment. When you get to a certain point with these images, the computers make mistakes. Once pointed out, hard to unsee. And she also had a question earlier, Linda did. Have we ever in history seen a strongman who, with such strength, being voted out and leaving, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, one of the only ones is one of the worst, Augusto Pinochet in Chile, who came in through a military coup and stayed for 17 years, but he, for various reasons, including losing the support of his US backers, and he's associated with neoliberal economics and the myth that he made Chile stable and productive. A lot of the book is about undercutting this myth that authoritarianism is good for business. And the economy worsened, and so there were mass protests that started against him. So he was voted out. And one thing very relevant to today, he had a long time, like over a year, between being voted out and being having to actually leave. And they gave him all kinds of soft things to get him to leave, like he stayed the head of the armed forces. But he spent the time sabotaging the new democracy, making it as difficult as possible. It goes back to the A1 story. And so he stacked the Supreme Court so that people loyal to him would have a majority. He passed a lot of laws to make sure his people, it was harder to prosecute his people for torture and all the other corruption things they did. So the vindictiveness of when they are voted out, which is very rare, vindictiveness, and they're not interested in helping the country. They're interested in destroying and blaming and making it as hard as possible for the next person to come in. So that's how that ended up.
Well, that sounds all very familiar in what's happening. Where do you stand on things that Trump is doing now, including, say, executions, and then we'll also see the range of pardons that are going to come down, and the drilling permissions, all of that.
Yeah.
Obviously not the executions, but some of these things can be reversed maybe, or can you talk through some of that?
Yeah, so that A1 story about all the scurrying around to get loyalists in place, and the reason they need the loyalists is before it was to steal the election. If that's not working, they're going to damage Biden's chances as much as possible. And the goal now is if he has to leave, he's going to make sure things are as horrible as possible, both in terms of coronavirus. They're also, and this goes back to why is he there? He's not there to to govern in a democratic sense. He's there to plunder the nation. So I was shocked to see, more than 100 environmental regulations have been turned back under Trump. And he's scurrying to do all the last damage and plundering and looting that he can. So I would advise people to watch very carefully. It's a great story on the front page of the Times. Each thing that's being done now, there's a reason for it. And it's very revealing of who they are, including the GOP, right? They're not just the enablers, they're the co-conspirators in the Trump presidency. So the priorities of the government and the vindictiveness are all coming out for everybody to see.
Thank you. We only have 15 minutes left with you. We're going to go through some quick questions. Is there a role for opposition leaders to be more vocal than Democrats currently are? And what do you think of Joe Biden asking for transition money from the public in terms of the fundraising that he's trying to do?
I'm not sure what I think about the asking from the public. In general, I don't think you could argue that it doesn't put him in a very dignified light. On the other hand, it shows up the extent to which he's being hamstrung by Trump. I think that there's a reason that right now Biden has wanted to be calm, decent, to lower the level and the tone, because we've all been exhausted by this constant histrionics and whining and threatening of Trump for so many years. That goes back to the comment about the journalist saying, oh, don't you secretly want him there? But no, people need a rest. So even without a pandemic, people are exhausted from this Trump cult stuff. So right now, it's not bad that he's having an even keel and talking about moving on. I think it would be a huge mistake to pardon Trump, though, because Trump has wrecked accountability and transparency in government. He's been very deliberate about that. That's why he's done so much to the federal bureaucracy. And if you pardon that, you're giving a signal not just to the GOP that stays there even when Trump leaves, but to the next Trump who comes along and wants to finish the work. So last night I released one of my transition videos about corruption, and I make all these points. It's only a minute and a half. If you go to my Twitter feed, you'll see it. And that's all taken from the book as applied to what's going on now. So that's how I see this at the moment.
Thank you, Ruth. Let's go back to the paper and see maybe the Sunday review section, because there's a lot in there that I know you would be interested in and you'll have some opinions on as well. We talked a little bit about Manju's cover on the review. Here we go. This was the contacts and the contact tracing. Let's keep going inside. Let's see who are the writers in here. And also, if you could just reflect, Ruth, for a minute, as you see the paper laid out there, like your relationship to the New York Times, how important is it to the work that you do? And how do you compare to other great newspapers in the world? Because you obviously read global newspapers.
So I'm glad you asked me that, because I grew up in Southern California, and my parents, my mother's from Scotland, my father's born in Jerusalem, and no family members in the States. Everybody was at least an 11-hour plane ride away. So it's kind of a global family. People are everywhere. And so I didn't grow up with the New York Times. I didn't really care. I mean, until I moved to New York in my 30s, I didn't follow it at all. I think that it has superb reporting. What it's been doing in investigative journalism, it has the resources. It is amazing, along with the Washington Post. I think that it's an institution, and so I see it I see it. I've been here a long time, but I'm not a New Yorker. So it gets held to higher standards. It also, like many institutions, tends to be conservative. So they have not wanted at all to follow the Trump as authoritarian line. Both, they certainly have never published an op-ed by me, and they're not interested in this reasoning. Their individual columnists do this, like Michelle Goldberg, but not their editorial line. But it's a fantastic paper, and it has an enormous amount of talent and carefulness, and it gets dragged a lot because it is, you know, the most important paper, the paper of record, and people hold it to higher standards. I also think that sometimes, because of the power of New York Times journalists, people expect them to be saviors, and they get angry at them if they don't do things, if they haven't responded in an adequate way to our emergency. But each journalist is part of a whole, and there's a certain culture in the paper that is perhaps a bit more conservative. And I mean more culturally conservative. I don't mean so much politically.
Sure. I think I saw a picture of Princess Diana in there from the Crown season 4. Are you a TV watcher? Are you a Crown watcher? Netflix? What are you watching?
I am a Netflix watcher. I'm not a Crown watcher. Simply haven't gotten around to it yet, so I can't comment on that. But I was raised with a mother from Scotland who's a huge royalist. So. Yes.
Neil, what does that say? Princess
Diana broke a nation's heart, unlike Donald Trump, who simply broke a nation. So the piece by Maureen Dowd is The Lady and the Trump. Unfeeling royals offer no respite from unfeeling Republicans. I'll put in Pam and I are big fans of The Crown. We just finished the current season. I think we're watching 1 or 2 episodes a night this week.
I have only seen season 4, and I recommend it because it's, you know, it starts with Margaret Thatcher coming to power and goes through the Princess Di years, not till the end, but till like 91, 92 is how season 4 ends. Let's just say Miriam Berkeley says, chilling. Professor Ben-Ghiat's analysis, I think, is absolutely correct. Thank you for having her on. You're most welcome, Miriam. And Apollo says, is it okay to be angry about what we're seeing in terms of the transition?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's part of, there's been part of the reason having people like this in power is exhausting, is that so many things happen every day. I was just doing an op-ed for CNN that's going to come out in the next days on transition and gender issues. And I was going back to some of my earlier op-eds, and when Trump was insulting women, calling them dogs, and you think of all we've been through, and all of his, you know, denigration. Look at how he responded to the Black Lives Matter protests. So he's been so despising and scornful of the American people, and these men always find fortune when there's been, after a period of a lot of progress in racial emancipation, gender equity, workers' rights. And so their job is to come in and turn these processes back. So we've been mistreated. We've been, many people compare him to an abuser in psychological terms. So anger is part of it, and in some ways, it's not until he leaves that we'll be able to feel fully how upset he's made us feel.
Sure. Let's see. Trisha of Vienna says, thanks to Ruth for her Twitter account. It helps me understand what I'm seeing. And there's so many great comments coming here. Jonathan says, scary and informative program. We'll look at the video of the cover after you leave, so that we don't have to hold you for that. But in the time we have left, you want to talk a little bit about the case against Donald Trump? Even if you haven't read this magazine, yet. That's the cover as we see there. What are your thoughts about how we should be thinking about the next 50, 60 days and beyond in terms of the case?
Yeah, so I haven't read it. So to start talking about the case is to also talk about the culture's tolerance for Donald Trump's way of doing business. And I hope that this Trump experience will get us to be much more resolute about corruption, anti-corruption measures, because Trump was able to become who he was, not only because his father set him up with 100 million or whatever it was, but because his entire way of doing business was about finding the gray zone between legality and illegality. That's how he did business. And the same was true for Berlusconi. And he brought everything about his life, from misogyny to this corruption. His Trump organization's been reputed for many decades to be a money laundering operation catering to Russians. So that's the Russian angle. So whatever charges he's brought up on, and by the way, he's been in 3,500 legal cases. He's been plaintiff in almost 2,000. So what he's doing now with trying to get lawyers in there and reverse the results, which isn't working, this is also how he does business. So his corruption has been known to all. And so we didn't vet our presidential candidate very well. So these charges that are coming up are also things that predate his presidency. And I hope it will be a wake-up call for practices that many Americans were complicit in, financial practices that urgently need attention.
Thank you. Neil's been showing us the various aspects of the Times Magazine cover story. Neil, I was curious what that next story was with that picture of the gentleman right after.
Sure.
This. What
Sure.
was the one after this? Yeah.
David Fincher, America's most famously exacting director, tackles the movie he's been waiting his entire career to make.
What is that film? Does it say what it's called?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. The headline is The Impossible Eye. I don't know if that's the title of the movie or not.
I'm a Fincher fan. He made Seven, which is one of the great movies.
Seven definitely is good.
Yeah. Mona says, thank you for an interesting analysis. Paulo says, thank you so much for this illuminating episode. Kathleen says, yes, I agree. We feel the response to his abuse differently after he leaves. We will feel differently. And that's certainly one of the issues here. And Himali says, the acting is brilliant on The Crown, worth watching for that alone. Olivia Colman and Gillian Anderson embody their characters in a way that you forget it is acting. I completely agree. And for those of you who are fans of the X-Files, the fact that Gillian Anderson is playing Margaret Thatcher is a shock the first time you see her, and you realize, it takes your breath away the first time you realize it's Gillian Anderson.
And David Fincher's new film is Mank. Thank you, Paula, for pointing that out.
All right.
Thank
you I haven't seen The Crown, but some people ask me, how come I don't have any female leaders in the book, and Margaret Thatcher or Indira Gandhi? And so my answer is that in Thatcher's case, she was called the Iron Lady, of course, and she, did not wreck a democracy. But she's interesting because she, she faced so much pushback from men, and she went to a voice coach to learn how to lower her voice a few pitches, because she was told that she'd be more authoritative in office if she had a lower voice, meaning more on the masculine scale.
Professor, you mentioned Indira Gandhi. What about her in terms of not including her in the book? Does she, with the emergency powers in the 70s, was that not as authoritarian as others that did make the cut? Or what was the thinking behind that?
So she definitely did lots of repressive things, as did Golda Meir. But I wanted to, one of the kind of contributions I'm making with the book is that plenty of people talk about propaganda and authoritarian corruption and violence, of course, but I really elevate masculinity, and I call it virility. There's a whole chapter on it, to be a tool of rule. And so I'm interested in this kind of male cult of power, which has a glamour for many people. This goes back to Donald Trump being the bad boy, because authoritarianism isn't only about obeying the rules. We think, oh, well, they want to follow orders. It's about the thrill of following somebody who breaks the rules, who tells you there's no limits. So this is very, I have a lot of female perpetrators and resistors in the book. And I think in the future, we're going to have a female authoritarian. Hopefully won't be a Ivanka Trump, who's being marketed as a leader. But I left out some of these historic figures, like Gandhi, and because I wanted to isolate this very particular brutal male brand of power that we have fetishized for way too long.
Thank you. We're going to let you go in just a minute after a final thought from you, Ruth. And also another plug for the book, please. Tell us why everyone should get the book.
It's, again, it's the first book to put Trump in historical perspective. It shows us, and including in the resistance chapter and how you get rid of these people, that what we're going through is in miniature, has been, to some extent, other people's have had a lot worse, but that our election, we really did something historic in turning back this process of authoritarian kind of capture of the state that I think would have been consolidated. And when you read the book, you'll see how what we see as so abnormal for American democracy is actually all of the things he's doing that we've mentioned on the show are normal for authoritarian history. So, and it ends on a positive note, which I'll leave readers to discover for themselves, about the importance of compassion and how that's actually worked to help get rid of these people in the past.
Awesome. And Zeddy says, thank you for this discussion. Terrific. We are going to say thank you and goodbye to Ruth. We're just going to continue here for a little bit more looking at the paper. And thank you, Ruth, for joining us. She's on Twitter. She's an amazing presence on Twitter, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, at Ruth Ben-Ghiat. Please check her out. And the book is called Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present. And she even told us, if you missed it, why they decided not to put Trump on the cover. If you missed the conversation, as soon as we're done, it'll rerun here from the top on all these platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Good luck with everything, and congrats on the book, and good luck with Thanksgiving and the holiday season.
You too. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ruth.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. All right. So great she was awesome to have on the show, and I'm so glad we were able to get her. So let's look at a couple of things that we didn't have a chance to get to, including the Times cover, which is something we like to look at because it tells us kind of the thinking process behind putting something so complicated together. And folks, we'll be here for another few minutes and then we'll wrap up. Here comes the cover. So here we go.
From the New York Times Magazine, this is Behind the Cover.
Our cover story this week by Jonathan Mahler assesses the potential criminal liability faced by President Trump as he leaves office.
We knew this one would be hard to visualize from the start, and we wanted to work with Pablo Delcan, a frequent contributor to the magazine. One of the challenges with this piece was trying to get at the scope of Trump's legal liabilities without suggesting guilt.
Our story is not really about Trump's guilt or innocence, but about what would happen if prosecution were attempted and what it will mean if it is not.
Yeah.
The folder is a nice metaphor because not only does it convey a kind of legal setting for the story, but it's also a container for the very problem that Jonathan's story is presenting the country with.
We worked with the photographer Hannah Whitaker to photograph the folder. I often find that when we're making some kind of still life of something that is meant to exist out in the world, you are looking at every detail and making specific choices and searching for the exact right rubber band, all in an attempt to make it look like it's unconsidered.
Trump once said that he has a PhD in litigation. And part of what he meant by that is that across his decades as a businessman, he sort of viewed the law as like another tool in the toolbox to get what he wanted. And so the question now for the country is, how do we make clear that, in fact, no one is above the law?
And that's the cover, behind the cover of the New York Times Magazine. I thought maybe that was a illustration, but clearly they designed it and then took a photograph of the folder. That was fascinating to see, and we love seeing the behind the cover segment of the Times.
Absolutely. Always a good feature. And again, it's that combination of showing what's in print and what's online to show what the Times is doing in various aspects. One of the articles that we saw earlier, Shri, was about contact tracing, and I thought it'd be good to show what they did with that as well.
Sure.
We saw the print version of this, and if you look at the online version,
Farhad Manjoo's cover review op-ed essay in the New York Times. So here we go. So
I thought my bubble was pretty small, and as you scroll down, it's his family and all the people his kids are interacting with, and their teachers, their learning pod. You just see it growing. That's how big, the pod is. And I think that's something that we're all contending with. We've been very intentional here. Pam, Emily, and I. We're not taking any chances. We're mostly staying in. We've actually just started doing Target runs where they drop off the bags in your trunk. So you could drive up and you show a code on your phone through the window, and the person comes out with a shopping cart and just puts it in your trunk. We've still been doing groceries ourselves, but that's really about it. This is not something to mess around with. And granted, a lot of people are thinking about the holidays and not seeing family. And my mom's comment, "Thank you, Mom, always for watching." It's hard not to go up and see family for Thanksgiving. We usually get together at my uncle's house in Long Island and get to see my mom. Christmas, we go up to see Pam's family in Connecticut. But this is something that we're all doing. It's our responsibility to take care of each other and make sure that we don't get ourselves sick, but inadvertently bring something to another part of the country, bring stuff to family who may be more vulnerable based on their health issues and based on their situation. Our parents are older. I have relatives who have chronic health conditions. The last thing we'd want to do is to share. In this case, sharing is not caring.
Yeah, not sharing is caring. And so
not sharing is caring.
Says that Indira Gandhi did a lot of damage during the emergency period. She instituted this kind of martial law in the mid-70s. Human rights were violated. Janine says, amazing talk, thank you. Linda says, I just got the book and it's a terrific read. This is about Ruth's book. And Chitachi says, this was fantastic. Thank you, Ruth. And Eve says, this was a very good discussion. And it's just been great to have everybody commenting and watching. In a couple of minutes, I'll have to leave because we have our next show that we're producing. So we're going to put on screen to just tell you about this show that we do. We direct called She's on Call with Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian. They are two surgeons who host this show. They've been hosting it for several months now, and you can find it at She's on Call on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. Please check them out. And they have they're talking about COVID, vaccines, and more. Dr. Aditya Shah is an infectious diseases specialist, and Richard Webby is a virologist at St. Jude, and Adi is at the Mayo Clinic. So that's today at 11 a.m. Eastern. So everyone, please tune in for that. I'll be in Neil's executive producer chair and director's chair to help put that together. I executive produce it with Sujana and Marina. We're delighted to have this. I'll also mention that my
Shri, before you move on, sorry, Shri, when she's on call, I want to point out, one of the things when we started the show was the emphasis on women, having Dr. Sujana and Dr. Marina lead the show, and having our colleagues Rose Horowitz, Vandana Menon, Julia Weeks do most of the production work. You certainly play a role with that, but have really given them a lot of guidance and let them run with the show. I think this may be one of the first shows where both of the guests are male physicians.
That's right. This is the second episode of both guests being male.
Or the second one.
But overall, the guests have been 10-1 have been women, and we're very proud of that. As many of you know, I had a daily COVID show as where we were covering COVID and all its aspects, and we did 250 episodes as of last Sunday, and then we decided to move to 1 to 2 times a week. Because 250 was a good round number, and frankly, our producers and I were exhausted from being live every single day for 200.
Different than a weekly show. Yeah. It's very different than a weekly.
Yeah, exactly. And the way you and the team put together the weekly show is also amazing. So we've now moved to once or twice a week. So we do have our next episode tomorrow night, and it's in conjunction with our friends at In Diaspora, and we cover various aspects of the crisis, but we also cover creativity and the arts. And my co-host is going to be Dr. Priya Natarajan, astrophysicist and author, and we'll be talking to Maya Ajmera, Arun Kumar, and VR Feroz, and that should be lots of fun. So that's 9 p.m. Eastern on Monday night, not on Sunday. So please join us for that. And I'll also make one more plug. One of the things we do every Sunday is that at Digimentors, we write a newsletter. And this week's newsletter is called How Are Masks Still Political? And we, Zach Peterson and I on our team put together this newsletter. And this week we used a fun photograph to kind of illustrate how things have changed. And what you're seeing here is a show that Neil and our team put together for Girls Incorporated of Omaha with the great Gloria Steinem. And you see the two of us on the left, and then you see the two of us on the right 25 years ago. How small this world is. Hemali Patel, whose comments you saw about the crown and other things, she and I put together this event for SAJA, the South Asian Journalists Association, and for Sakhi, for South Asian Women and Anti-Domestic Violence Group. And I look at this picture and say, the last 25 years have been much kinder to Gloria Steinem than they have been to me. Even though some of you have said nice things, including Neil's mom said something nice about my beard. I've got to say, my wife Rupa hates the beard, but she's not me all day, so she doesn't see it as much. So one day she's going to be on a Zoom call, and then you'll see the beard is gone. And your mom said that we're now wearing matching beards, Neil. And
not yet, Shri. You still have a ways to go.
And Patricia says, great throwbacks. And I've got to say, I was so inspired by being with Gloria Steinem again, and she inspired those young girls and women of all ages in that work, in that virtual event that we did. And that reminds me to tell everybody that you can hire Neil, me, and the entire Digimentors team to help you with your virtual events. So please do join us. Please do let us know if you have virtual events coming up. And these are, this is the newsletter. You see how you can sign up. It's srinet.substack.com. And we have great tech tip every week from our friend Bob Anthony, and lots to read and listen to on the show, in the newsletter. So please take a look. And this was really heartbreaking to watch Rachel Maddow talk about the importance of taking care of each other.
Her partner,
crisis.
She announced that her partner was sick.
Yeah, exactly. And that was really.
And so as Shree's discussing, go ahead, and if you are interested in having us produce a show like this for you, please contact us, Shree@digimentors.group. You can email Shree, and we'd be more than happy to produce a show. Before we close out, before we let Shree go, I just want to have him thank our sponsors again and recognize Muckrack for the great work that they're doing. Shree?
Yeah, many thanks to Muckrack. They have been sponsors of our Muckrack Academy episode that we put together, a course, a free course on the fundamentals of social media. Anybody can sign up. It's about 2 hours of work, and you will learn a lot in those 2 hours, but you can do it over 2 days. And we also have a Muckrack Muckrack live show where we interview fascinating media figures. So please check that out at muckrack.com.
Absolutely. And then we also want to thank Strategy Focus Group for the great support they're doing. In addition to Muckrack, Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. So thank you to both Muckrack and Strategy Focus Group for your support of the New York Times Read Along. If you're interested in being a sponsor, please feel free to reach out to either Shree or myself. You can reach Shree at his email address, shree@digimentors.group, or myself, Neil Parekh, neil@digimentors.group. And we encourage you to learn more about our sponsors by going to readalong.link/muckrack or readalong.link/strategy focus group. With that, the last order of business is to thank our team. Shree, I can go ahead and do that. I know you have a show to produce, but we'll thank our team. And
I just wanted to show Jonathan showing off that he was able to do the course in 1 hour and 45 minutes. It didn't even take him the 2 hours. So thanks. And by the way, Jonathan watched 250 episodes in a row in 250 days. We have to still figure out some kind of gold star that we can get him for doing that. And
so
Patricia
Jonathan,
says,
before we leave Jonathan, go back. His time was what, 1 hour 45, I think he said. Jonathan, I did it in about 1 hour 15. The trick is to change the speed at which Shree is talking to about 1.75. That was a speed that I was able to still follow what he was saying. But it was a little chipmunky, but not too much.
That's hilarious.
So let's see what you can do with that. Patricia's comment, 2 hours of fundamental learning, especially during the novel coronavirus, absolutely essential. Always, use this time. I think, Shree, some of the comments you made earlier in the pandemic when we locked down, use this time to learn something. Use this time to work on a project. Unfortunately, I think that, we're going to have more time than we expected. It's not 2 weeks that people thought, initially back in March, not the 2 months. Most estimates are that people are going to be working from home. Most companies are announcing that they're working from home at least until next summer, until July. There's some hope. There's some positive news about a vaccine, but by the time it's produced, distributed, that gets out to everyone who needs it, there's still a lot of time for people to learn stuff. So definitely take up projects as you can.
You're so right. With that, I'm going to leave a reminder to everyone. Please watch She's on Call at She's on Call. You can find on Facebook and Twitter. We'll be live at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and you will learn a lot. And we'll talk specifically about vaccines and about where things are with COVID-19. The two surgeons, Sujana and Marina, who are hosting, do a fabulous job, and we're very proud to work with them on the show. And with that, I'm going to step away. And thank you to you, Neil, to Ruth, and to our fabulous team for putting this together. We are taking next Sunday off, Thanksgiving Sunday. We're going to be dark on this show, but we will be back the Sunday after on December 6th. So everybody, please join us 8:30 a.m. Eastern time For the foreseeable future, we will be doing the New York Times read along. So we'd love to get guest ideas, topic ideas, sponsorship ideas. If you like the community we've built here, thousands of people watching every week, please tell your friends to watch. And if anyone wants to get in touch about sponsoring us, please let us know. With that, I'll say goodbye. Thank you, everybody. See you soon.
Now, before this comment from Apollo, the beards look good on both of us. I think we should definitely get a screenshot of this and share this with the loved ones who are naysayers.
Not
that it'll make a difference, but
I don't think any outsider comments will sway Rupa on this. But
I don't think so either. I do want to thank, before we leave, our production team, and again, the reminder that we're not doing a show next Sunday, but Paula, Steve, Julia, and Carla, thank you so much for the work that you do every week, whether it's in analytics or getting guests, helping in Facebook and LinkedIn. Thank you so much. And I also want to do a shout out to Carla Baranauckas for the Local Connection newsletter. The Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University brings you the Local Connection newsletter. Each week it offers story ideas and pro tips for journalists. And best of all, it's free. So please subscribe, bit.ly/local news tips, bit.ly/local news tips. And with that, we will bring this week's episode of the New York Times Read Along to a close. Our guest, of course, was Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat. She's the professor of history and Italian studies at New York University and author of Strongmen, Mussolini to the President. And yes, it is about Donald Trump. So with that, again, thank you for joining us. Here's a look at the front page from today. We're celebrating 5 years of the New York Times Read Along, and we hope you can join us, not November 29th, but the first weekend in December, December 6th, will be our next episode. Thank you.